I'm not going to share. I mean, by the way, I think you should, if you're married, you should really actively try not to commit adultery. I think that's.
I do too.
I totally agree with that 100%. But him specifically saying that, I reached exactly the opposite conclusion. I'm just going to say that.
Yeah, I don't trust them when they're that perfect, and it's just like it's planned. Everything they say is planned, and that's why I like Trump. You know, does Trump make some bad? I don't believe everything you say. You don't believe everything I say. I don't believe Trump doesn't believe everything I say, but I mean, what they're doing now, he's already an iconic figure, and they're going to turn him into a martyr. And they're making him more powerful and more powerful and more powerful. And I could see him, if the election was fair, I could see him just totally steamrolling. If it was fair, I know it would be.
You think it will be?
Well, who do we have to fight? Who do we have to fight? Ronna McDaniels? Give me a break. I mean, we got Scott Pressler out there beating the streets. He's beating the street like a bicycle clown out there. He is going around everywhere. He's registering voters. He's on the ground, and the Republican Party won't give him the time of day. He knows every rule to every county in this country. And if you could have 1,000 of him out there and they trained another 1,000, you could sweep this thing.
Why do you think they're not doing that?
Well,
I mean, why would you have someone as mediocre and incapable as Ronna McDaniel, who has no track record of success in any area? Why would she run the Republican Party? That's pretty weird, right?
I have no idea. I remember when 90% of the people were complaining about her, getting the job again. I remember one of the donors. So y'all, this has nothing to do with y'all. The donors picked this. I remember reading a story like that, and
that sounds true.
It's true. They don't care. They don't care about us. I mean, I always say, especially when it comes to Trump, the Democrats will cheat and the Republicans will let him because they hate Trump.
Yeah.
They hate him. And, I mean, it's a simple choice to me. I mean, he's the only resist president in my lifetime.
Why do you think they hate him so much?
Because he's not a part of their club. This is not about Trump to me. It's just like, this is an outsider, and we're going to destroy his life. And we're going to show everybody out there that if you pick an outsider, somebody that we hadn't picked, going back to a Bush versus Obama situation, if it's not the people we pick that we're okay with, we're going to destroy their lives. They can't even get a lawyer. They'll arrest your lawyer for defending you.
Yeah. And
we're going to make up stuff. We're going to say your property that's worth $1 billion is worth $13.74. We're going to do whatever we can. And this is to show not just Trump, but to anybody in the next 50 years, we will stick the FBI, the CIA, we will destroy you if you're not our chosen people. And that's what I think is going on.
If Trump is prevented from appearing on the ballot in November, if he's arrested, something even worse happens, which is entirely possible.
That's the next step.
Of course it's the next step. I don't even want to say it out loud. Everyone knows.
I hate saying it. But
no,
it's
of
true.
course. I'm not going to, but everyone knows what I'm talking about. But if he is prevented, if democracy is prevented from proceeding, what do you think the response from his voters is going to be, since you follow this carefully?
Well, why do you think they do the January 6th things? They want you scared that if you do anything, you could be 80 foot away, outside the tape of the Capitol. You could be a half a mile away, and they're going to come after you.
Because there haven't been any, this used to be a country where people felt free to assemble, as is guaranteed them in the Constitution, to make their views known. You had demonstrations and rallies. You haven't seen, January 6th was the last one on the right that I'm aware of.
That's what they're trying to do, scare you.
So, but do you think that there will be demonstrations if something...
Oh, yeah. Yeah. But like I say, they're just making him more powerful.
Making Trump more powerful.
Yeah. I hate to tell you libs this, but because of you, in 100 years, they're not going to be talking about me or even you. They're going to be talking about Trump in 100 years.
I agree with that.
He's going to be one of the biggest figures in the history of our country. Not because of what he did, but because of how they're treating him. And they're making him more powerful. And if he gets arrested and gets put in a jail, can you imagine? And it could happen. People say it couldn't happen. Oh, it could happen.
It could happen very easily.
Yeah.
Who should he pick as his running mate?
Oh, man, I go back and forth from this. I would like to say this, that I don't think the VP pick really matters that much. I mean, we got Harris as a VP that proves
Right.
it.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, it takes a long time for me to trust you, but I'm starting to like Vivek. And I'm
Yeah.
not sure if he's fake, and I'm not sure if it's just a show, but man, he's pissing them off as bad as me and you.
Yeah, they hate him.
They do, and he's saying, I mean, boy, them debates, my God, he got Ronna McDaniel, he got all of them mad. But and isn't it funny? He's running the campaign exactly what DeSantis should have been running. He's running the campaign that DeSantis, but DeSantis is running a Nikki Haley campaign.
Does it seem that way?
It does to me.
Why?
I think you said something about his online team is just so cringe, and
I shouldn't have said that. I shouldn't have gotten involved in that. I've been trying to stay out of it. I just and I know some
Well,
of
they
them,
are.
and they, but yeah, it does.
I don't understand it. I mean, people like people build trust with you. It's consistency over time.
Yeah.
And when you're a Trump supporter, well, some of them hated Trump. Then you loved Trump and you loved him, and now you love DeSantis. And then if he's gone, you're going to love Nikki Haley. People don't trust that. And I don't have anything against any of them. I mute a lot of them. I don't carry grudges with these people, and I welcome anybody in when it's over.
Of course.
I don't have any grudges.
Do you think that? But it does seem. I mean, I don't follow it very closely. I'll admit, I don't want to follow it closely. But it does seem like there's enormous bitterness between the DeSantis people and the Trump people.
Oh, there is. It's crazy. And I try not to get into the personal attacks. I'm kind of like Trump, even on X. If you want to, I'm a shit poster. If you want to come at the shit poster with 2 million followers, come on. And an army of foaming at the mouth, just waiting for me to say something, to get on somebody. But I very seldom. I don't just attack first. But if you keep attacking me, but it doesn't bother me. I don't take any of this stuff personally. I mean,
I don't either.
They call me every name in the book.
What
I'll be called. That they'll. You're old. You're fat. You're ugly. I mean, that's how they fight. Which all three are kind of true. I'll have to beat them the next round. But people get so mad at this, and you have to if you have to step back from it. And I think it's funny. I've lived in the real world where I've been in bar fights. I've real stuff. So somebody calling me ugly and old and a boomer, I don't care.
Yeah.
Do you? I don't care.
I don't even know what people say. I'm not. I care what the people I love think.
That's me too.
And that's it. And like you, I have a lot of dogs, which really helps.
Yeah.
Do you think the breach between those two camps, Trump, DeSantis, can be fixed?
Yeah, I think some of it, some people can't, but most people can. But this is my first primary. It's been, I don't know if it's ever been this vicious, but so I supported DeSantis. I'm a Florida guy, and I was glad he was our governor. And
me too.
I don't get paid by any campaign, and I pushed hard, and I was so glad when he won by 20 points, and I was so happy. And I think he's a good governor.
Yeah.
And and I try to tell people, I don't want him so beaten down and hammered that we end up getting a blue governor next, a Gavin Newsom to destroy our state. I mean, you're here now. But someone from his team, not crazy high up, but they asked me my honest opinion about it when he said he was going to run. And I was like, don't do it. Whatever you do, don't run. Think about, and this is what I told him. I said, okay, he's 44, young.
Yeah.
And he just won re-election by the biggest landslide. I was like,
govern your state.
Yeah. And how perfect is the timing? When when the end of your 8 years is up, would be right getting in the meat of the 2028.
That's right.
So this is what I tell him: support Trump because he helped you, and you don't want the Trump supporters. They can destroy you. I mean, you don't want them. You don't want to turn on them. I swear, I said, look, just please, this is my advice. Just have him governor, support Trump all he can, and in 28. You got Biden with only 4 years left or Trump with only 4 years left. And now you're more popular, and now you have all the Trump people. You have all the DeSantis people, and you can moonwalk into the White House in 2028. Moonwalk. That's my exact words I use.
What was the response you got?
Yeah, okay, thanks a lot. A lot of people don't take me too seriously, but and I hate it. I hate it's going like this, but
A lot of people do take you seriously, which is interesting.
it is.
And I can see why. I think you're insightful.
No, thank you.
How many politicians have you met personally?
Well, when personally, I kind of keep to myself, but DM wise and messaged me, they all love me when it comes to election time. Hey, will you retweet this and retweet this? And I can't name 5 people in either party I trust. I just don't trust anybody anymore, and they don't deserve our trust. The Republican Party, I mean, come on, they don't know how to fight.
No, I know.
They're over there talking about their principles, and they're arresting their political opponents. So you better get in the game. And we get the power of the gavel, and what do they do with it? Seriously, nothing. I mean, this is how you fight. When you get the gavel, you do your own January 6th committee.
But do you think it's because they don't understand how to fight, or they're throwing the match?
I don't know if they just don't care,
Yeah.
or they don't know how, or they're just cowards. But the truth is, see, this is how you fight. You get a January 6th committee, and you don't allow any Democrats on it. And you put everybody on it they hate, just like they did us. You put Marjorie Taylor Greene, Boebert, Gates.
Yeah.
That's the January 6th committee. You don't allow them to have any witnesses. And you start subpoenaing. Let's see what Nancy Pelosi was talking to the Capitol Police. You start subpoenaing everybody. And you have it on C-SPAN every day for years. And if you don't start fighting like that, it's over for this country.
Well, but and also you have an obligation to do that because it's in pursuit of the truth.
I know.
What do you make of the fact that the new Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, has not released the videotape, which he controls?
Well, I told everybody, that he was going to be awful. I warned everybody. They had that little kumbaya moment. He did what did he do? Exactly what Kevin McCarthy did. He said he's going to release it, so they get the big headlines, gets everybody excited. They release 1% of 1%, and then they just don't do it anymore. And look what when you release that, the Q shaman, he got out of prison because of that one little 5 minutes. Think of what if they would just release it, but they can't do it. It's just push the button, just push the button and release it. I know when he was talking about Ukraine funding, he was like, well, we have to at some point do the Ukraine funding because we don't want Russia steamrolling over Europe. That was his exact words, or I'm paraphrasing close.
Do you think, I mean, obviously you'd have to be really stupid to believe that. I'm assuming he's not stupid. I mean, why would he say something like that?
It's the same thing they always do to get us ginned up about a war.
Also, by the way, if Russia invaded Western Europe, could it be in worse shape than it is now? I mean, it was the U.S. government that blew up the German economy. It wasn't the Russians. It was the Biden administration that blew up Nord Stream.
Oh, yeah.
And ended their main source of cheap energy. So, could the Russians be worse than that? Maybe, I guess. But, I don't get it.
Well, they've used Ukraine as kind of their 51st state, and they with no rules.
Yeah.
The biolabs, which they lied about, then told the truth. Everybody in Washington, their kids over there making $4 million a year, at some kind of company. But so I don't let them gin me up, and they try to gin you up more and get you mad. And I can't get emotional when we have 100,000 people dying of fentanyl poison in our own country. I'm not going to get emotional. I hate war. I'm anti-war. I'm the one that wants a peace deal. You're the one that wants to keep. And here's the problem with Ukraine. I think we're going to end up in the same spot a year or so from now. I think there's going to be a peace agreement at some point, and there's going to be 1 million dead people, and Russia's going to take a little bit of the country, and we're going to be in the same place we would have been.
And no one will ever apologize for all those dead.
And they're just going to call us Putin puppets because we want peace, and that's it.
Couldn't agree more. So, first of all, thank you for doing this. I appreciate it.
No problem.
Last question: do you you went from installing fiber line to becoming legitimately famous only because of your voice? You were allowed to talk in public. It was purely democratic. People liked what you said, they supported you. All of that is contingent on having a voice. Do you think a year from now you will have the same voice? You will be allowed to say the things that you are saying now?
Well, I hope so. But you see what they're doing to come after me. I hate to say this, but I tell my family all the time, hey, the FBI could frame me. Who knows? I mean, I don't trust them.
No, you
I hate saying that. I want an FBI that I don't feel that way about. But hey, that they can do anything. If they want to get me, they're going to get me. But I'm not going to shut up. So that's it. I'm not shutting up.
So do you feel that you will be able to reach the same audience a year from now?
I think so. I mean, it's gone up. I'm I'm doing my own events now. We're doing we did Turd Stock. I do want to mention that, which was it was kind of a John Rich and I was kind of a joke, and I said, no, I'm serious. Instead of Woodstock, let's do Turd Stock. And
where'd you do it?
Yeah, at the Redneck Riviera, up at his place in November. That's was my big coming out where everybody got to see me, and had some great musicians. We're actually one of the musicians, Angie Aparo, who is has got you'd love this story, Tucker. It's the Great American Comeback story. He wrote a Cry for Faith Hill, and she won a Grammy, and he was this like unbelievable musician with his voice, and he was on his way up, signed with a record label, and then he had a stroke and completely lost his voice and couldn't talk. And so he spent I think 2016, 2017 learning how to talk again. And so now he's on his way back up, and he was there, and we're doing an event for him on the 24th. So I'm going to just keep kind of staying in my lane and just do what I do. I probably won't be going to the red carpet events to meet everybody and get pictures. But
So we're going to miss you at Davos next week.
I'm not going to be there.
You're not going to be there?
Yeah, I don't know. I just don't. I don't seem like I fit in there. To me, I'm more of the hanging out with the people kind of person. But it was nice to meet you, and I really appreciate you inviting me.
Oh, we're grateful.
I mean, like, what? Women, don't worry, we're not replacing you. Don't worry, everything's cool. Chadwick Morris with The Spectator. He joins us tonight. Chadwick, I have so many questions for you. One of them, where do we make up all these jobs? The economy's degrading, and this dude has found a job dressing like a woman, wearing a nose ring, and then he's gotten hired by Hershey's? Is there a major for that in college? Where do these jobs come from?
Well, first of all, happy International Women's Awareness Month, or whatever it is right now. We all like a little nuts in our chocolate. I don't see what the big deal is. I love nuts in my chocolate, so I think it's perfectly fine. I think it's a real tragic start to Women's History Awareness Month that this shop teacher, who I think we all agree is delicate and as lovely and temperate as a summer's day, really, is under investigation for maybe not being really trans. When did we start questioning people's identity like this? Yes. She also, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but aside from being transgender, she's also disabled. She suffers from gigantomastia, which is an unusual swelling of the breast tissue. In her case, it's prosthetic breasts, which apparently become sentient and swelling on their own. So this is just how it is now. If you say you're a woman, that's how it is, and women seem to be okay with it because very few are speaking up and being loud about being erased in this way and taken over by men in dresses. And
Talk about mansplaining, though. I mean, isn't this the ultimate mansplaining? I'm a woman now. You shut up, ladies. And they're like, okay, I'll shut up. If some dude dressed like a woman tells me what it's really like to be a woman, I guess I can't say anything. What?
Yeah, well, I mean, you don't want to get knocked down and bruised by those prosthetic breasts. I wouldn't challenge that guy either.
You know what? That's a very good point. Chadwick Moore, common sense intrudes. Thank you so much for coming on tonight.
Thank you. My pleasure.
So the defenders of democracy are out defending democracy again. They're telling you it's really, really dangerous, and anyone would get to see the thousands of hours of surveillance footage from January 6th, which has been hidden from the public for 2 years, as a tiny group of people gets to make up stories about what happened that day and change the country on the basis of those stories. And we respectfully disagree. We think people should, in a democracy, be allowed to see what their government is doing and get as much evidence as they can. And it turns out the public agrees. Rasmussen, the polling firm, just found that 80% of American voters believe it's important that the public should be allowed to see the videos from January 6th. That would include 86% of Republicans, okay, but it would also include 78% of Democrats, 78% and 75% of independents. Wow. So you're defending democracy, but you're denying people information on the basis of which they can make their own decisions. How does that work exactly? Well, it's not democracy, of course. It's building a bulwark against your lies being revealed. And they are lying. And we know that because we've been looking at the tape. We're going to bring you information on the tape and some of it next week. And we think it's going to be really, really interesting. Winston Marshall played lead guitar and banjo for the band Mumford & Sons, which became internationally famous and successful, and for good reason. They're great. Then he made the mistake of mildly praising a book about Antifa writers that he read written by Andy No. And his life just changed in an instant. He became a political figure he didn't want to be. And ultimately, he was attacked so harshly he had to leave the band. So we thought it'd be interesting to spend an hour with him, and we just did for a brand new episode of Tucker Carlson today. He's a pretty amazing person, actually, we discovered. Here's part of our conversation.
The music industry and the creative industries more broadly was it was the black squares on social media, and if you remember, there were a lot of actors and actresses fronting money to bail out the various rioters, and there was a big social media campaign to raise money here, and they were bailing out those who were arrested in the 2020 riots. And so that's actually the atmosphere, and I guess that's perhaps why what happened to me is because it was so contrary to the prevailing politics, I guess, of the creative industries. So I had very few followers, by the way. I think about 3,000 followers on Twitter. Somehow, this book, and it honestly feels like an act of God, which I know that sounds a bit crazy, but
it doesn't. For the record, it doesn't sound crazy at all.
My life sort of started to crumble. Initially, I was like, "So what? It'll pass." But that's when you get the sort of phone calls from loved ones and friends and people you work with just panicking, and this dog pile actually became almost real life dog pile of just everyone in my life around me. And
what was their complaint?
Well, I guess the people I were working with, they were getting attacked by these Antifa, maybe not quite as much as me, but they were, they were getting harassed by these people as well. And they're very effective online. Like, for example, there was a whole night where they were changing my Wikipedia page from Winston Marshall is a banjo player to Winston Marshall is a fascist. And it was just, I had another friend trying to change it back, and they're just all night like at it, and they just swarm you like hornets in everything they do to try and destroy you.
If you wind up with a society that cannot tolerate a man like Winston Marshall, who is rational, reasonable, decent, that's a problem. That's on you, not on Winston Marshall. That whole conversation is on Fox Nation right now. Well worth it. So evidence emerges that a prominent House Democrat has direct ties to Chinese intelligence. But if you notice it, guess what you are? You're a racist! Great story. After the break. Judy Chu is a member of Congress from the state of California. Not super famous. We didn't know much about her. But then we saw a Daily Caller piece that had multiple photographs showing Judy Chu, member of Congress, accepting honorary appointments at two groups linked directly to Chinese intelligence. That's a huge problem. So this weekend, Congressman Lance Gooden of Texas suggested that maybe Judy Chu shouldn't have a security clearance. Maybe she should explain what she was doing with Chinese intelligence. That's not crazy. But of course, it caused a complete meltdown in the media. You're a racist! All right. Ying Ma is the author of the book Chinese Girl in the Ghetto, which is excellent, by the way. She joins us tonight to assess all of this. Ying Ma, thank you so much for coming on. So I don't really know what this has to do with race, but I can't help notice that when the pandemic first started, the Chinese government accused anybody who thought maybe it came from the Wuhan lab of racism. So I'm seeing kind of a playbook here.
Oh, yes, definitely. Now, I should say that no one should have her loyalty to America questioned based on race, but nobody should be able to cry racism in order to circumvent legitimate scrutiny of very troubling ties to communist China, especially to the Chinese Communist Party's front organizations here in the U.S. Now, Judy Chu has a habit of crying racism, not only regarding her own affiliations with these very disturbing groups, but also to thwart legitimate inquiry from Congress, as well as efforts to counter the Chinese threat. She in fact successfully stopped a Democratic colleague from joining a Republican effort to condemn China's role in spreading COVID in the early days of the pandemic. And she also opposed the recent creation of that very bipartisan Select Committee on China for the purpose of countering the Chinese threat from the Communist Party in China. So this kind of politics is poisonous. My organization, the American Ideals PAC, we were formed precisely to counter this type of politics. If you guys agree with that, find us, support us at AmericanIdealsPAC.com, AmericanIdealsPAC.com. The point of it all is that when people do this kind of race baiting, they're not even telling the truth. Judy Chu claims that whenever you criticize China this way, you're fanning anti-Asian violence and anti-Asian sentiments. But she is the last person who will tell you that many of these very gruesome physical attacks we've seen against Asians in this country are perpetrated by non-whites, not by white supremacists. These are people who are reluctant to say that. All they want to say is that Trump is at fault and Republicans are at fault.
She's a shill for China, obviously, and she's hiding it. Yingma, great to see you tonight. Thank you. Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson tonight. Happy Monday. The dominant rumor on the internet over the weekend was that Donald Trump will soon be indicted, possibly even handcuffed on camera. Is that true? We can't say. We do know that Trump is the subject of a grand jury investigation in Manhattan. That's a city that voted against Donald Trump by almost 80% in the last presidential election. We also know that the grand jury was impaneled by a Soros-funded DA called Alvin Bragg, who looks and acts like a Tawana Brawley-era Al Sharpton. So we would assume, on the basis of that evidence, that it's pretty likely Trump does get charged with something at some point. But charged with what? That's the question that should matter. In a free country, laws are universal. Laws apply to all citizens equally, precisely because all citizens are considered equal. For generations, this was very obvious to American liberals. In fact, it was the basis of their worldview. That was back when liberals opposed Jim Crow and were not trying to reinstate it as something called equity. We are not liberals, but we retain the traditional American view, which is that laws must be applied equally, or else they're not laws at all. Justice must be blind, or else it is tyranny. So we spent the day with the help of a lawyer on our staff trying to assess the likely charges against Donald Trump. And here's what we found. 8 years ago, as he was running for president, Trump paid a porn actress called Stormy Daniels $130,000. Daniels alleged that she and Trump had at one point had sex. Trump denied that. He still denies it. But in exchange for promising not to repeat that claim in public, Trump, through his then attorney, Michael Cohen, sent Stormy Daniels a check. Was that legal? Well, we can answer that question. Because there was a campaign in progress at the time, officials at the Federal Election Commission later examined the transaction between Trump and Stormy Daniels. Federal investigators concluded that nothing criminal had taken place. And in fact, settlements like this, whatever you think of them, are common, both among famous people, celebrities, and in corporate America. The result is usually known as an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement. In this case, you can believe whatever side you want to believe, but paying people not to talk about things, hush money, is ordinary in modern America. According to the FEC, there was no need for Donald Trump to report his payments to Stormy Daniels, nor was the money that he sent her through his attorney subject to campaign finance limitations. The FEC determined the entire thing was a personal expenditure. It clearly was. So what is the crime here? Well, the media don't seem very interested in finding out. This is Donald Trump. He's a criminal. Everything he does is a crime. Watch.
Simply because he may have committed worse crimes, you don't let him off of lesser crimes. If you are, for example, seeking a prosecution for murder, if the guy gets caught drunk driving in another context before that, you don't just let him go because you have bigger fish to fry.
Nobody is above the law, including Donald Trump. It doesn't matter that this is kind of a minor crime compared to some of the other allegations.
A crime is a crime is a crime is a crime. That's what anybody prosecuting or a judge would say.
A crime is a crime is a crime, as Mika said. An indictment is an indictment is an indictment. When I hear people saying this is much ado about nothing, I think about all the members of Congress I served with and understanding every single one of them would have been charged and sent to jail had they done this.
I was reading the Bible, which said that a man sows, that he may also reap.
Joe Scarborough, ladies and gentlemen, telling us what a crime is. A crime with a woman. Okay. There's Al Sharpton lecturing us about the Bible. It's hilarious. Oh, the hypocrisy. But it didn't really answer the question. Why are we handcuffing Donald Trump? Liberals don't seem to care at all as long as it happens, as long as Trump gets handcuffed. But in fact, there's plenty of evidence that Trump committed no crime in sending money to Stormy Daniels. We don't have to guess. Consider the case of former North Carolina Senator John Edwards. Edwards was often described as a fiery liberal, but in fact he was a populist. He ran for president twice, and in the process infuriated the leaders of the Democratic Party by talking way too much about income inequality. They really hated him for that. Long after Edwards left office, Barack Obama's DOJ charged him with federal finance violations. So the premise of the case against John Edwards was that he had received $1 million in gifts and that he spent that money in hush money payments to his mistress, with whom he later had a child. Obama's DOJ argued that the money that Edwards sent to his girlfriend amounted to campaign contributions. Edwards never reported that money, so Obama's DOJ tried to send him to prison. Well, in the end, the case fell apart under the weight of its own incoherence. So Obama's lawyers argued that any payment that could conceivably help a political candidate politically is by definition a campaign expenditure. There's no law that says that, by the way, they just made it up. But if you think about it for a second, it doesn't make sense. If that were true, flip it around. It would mean that candidates could use donor money and also taxpayer money in the form of federal matching funds to pay for any personal expense as long as that expense could conceivably benefit them politically. So candidates could take federal matching funds, tax dollars, to buy Ferraris as long as they argued those Ferraris would appear in campaign ads, et cetera, et cetera. It's nonsensical. So not surprisingly, John Edwards was acquitted in that case. It was a humiliating defeat for the Obama administration, but it also sent a clear message and set a precedent which Alvin Bragg apparently is ignoring. So we don't know that an indictment's coming, as noted, and if it does come, we're not sure what it's going to say. We haven't seen it. But if Trump is indicted for sending money to Stormy Daniels, well, you'll be watching the abuse of law enforcement power. Oh, but you can't complain about it. Because as Congresswoman Maxine Waters has explained, political protests staged on behalf of Donald Trump are not constitutionally protected. They're domestic terrorism. Watch.
This is Donald Trump sending messages out to domestic terrorists that he's worked with and he helped to organize for the invasion of the Capitol on January 5th. He's sending out a message to them to get ready to protest any arrests, indictments, etc. that he may have. So he's basically talking to the Proud Boys, the Oath Keepers, QAnon, KKK.
Oh, January 6th. The only really organized group on January 6th was the FBI, of course. But consider the idea and where it's coming from. This is Maxine Waters. This is the lady who cheered on the LA race riots 3 decades ago. This is the very same person who just a few years ago said, and we're quoting, if you see anybody from the Trump cabinet in a restaurant, in a department store, at a gasoline station, she's very old, get out and create a crowd. And you push back on them and you tell them they're not welcome anymore, anywhere. Basically necklace them. Okay, Maxine Waters. But she's a Democrat, so this is just a civil rights exercise. She's protected from domestic terrorism charges. And Alvin Bragg is too. He's a Democrat. And you should know, we don't want to impugn his character or anything. We don't want to suggest that there's a connection between politics and the indictment of Donald Trump. But Alvin Bragg did run for office promising, as a campaign promise, to indict Donald Trump. We're not guessing. He gave televised interviews about it. Watch.
All right, so newspaper reports today say we could expect to see an indictment to be handed down against Donald Trump soon. Any thoughts on how you would handle such a high-profile case?
Certainly throughout my career, I've gone wherever the facts have taken me. And the types of allegations that have been reported publicly, valuation of assets, perhaps the use of shell companies, tax fraud. I've done all these sort of cases. I've tried a mortgage fraud case. I've tried one of the most significant money laundering cases out in the New York region. So of all the candidates, I sort of stand at the ready with all the tools in the toolkit.
Yeah, we're going to go after Trump. And by the way, he listed some real crimes there, and they have spent years trying to pin those crimes on Trump. They even got his tax returns illegally, and they found none of them. Not an offense to Trump, just true. So we wind up with this, which is piddling. But what's interesting is even as Bragg has been single-mindedly focused, Bragg, a graduate of Harvard College, on Donald Trump and his crimes, sending money to a porn star, he has been not only ignoring real crimes, but downgrading felonies to misdemeanors and letting actual violent criminals out of jail as quickly as possible. On his first day in office, Bragg, consistent with the ideas of the man who paid for his campaign, George Soros, issued a memo explaining his office will, quote, not seek a carceral sentence except in cases involving homicides, economic crimes, and a small number of felonies. Now, that was great news for people who commit violent felonies, including rapists like Justin Washington. Washington struck a deal with Bragg that allowed him to serve just 30 days in jail under the theory that his rape was really just second-degree coercion. So he got out quickly, and when he did, police say this same man sexually attacked 5 other people in the Bronx. He even tried to rape a homeless woman at 10 in the morning. Okay. So in another case, a career criminal who was arrested 3 times in 4 months for serious crimes, including assault and aggravated harassment, skipped court. And when police finally found him and hauled him to court, Bragg's office let him go in January of last year. What's interesting is that no one cares. Where's Joe Scarborough in that? Is he upset about it? Is his wife upset? Power to women. Right. All the arch feminists who should be out there defending women, they don't care at all. So here you have a DA who treats violent felonies like they're misdemeanors, even when it gets people killed, who's unleashing criminals on the population, but then spending all of his time trying to destroy his political opponents. In this case, elevating a misdemeanor charge to a felony for the purpose of taking down Trump. Now, here's what we think, if there is an indictment, will form the core of the charge. Bragg seems to be alleging that Trump violated New York's Business Record Act by falsely reporting the payout to Stormy Daniels as, quote, legal fees. Now, if this were true, it would constitute a misdemeanor, and the statute of limitations has already run out for that, for the bookkeeping error, assuming it even happened. But Bragg apparently is thinking about charging Trump under a felony version of the business records law, one that punishes businesses for falsifying records as a way to commit another separate crime. That would be the campaign finance violation, which, as we mentioned, was not a campaign finance violation, and we know that from the FEC, which polices campaign finance violations. And by the way, if it were, then that would be a federal crime, not something that Alvin Bragg, the Manhattan DA, would be prosecuting. The whole thing doesn't make any sense at all. On a legal level, on a political level, it does, because Trump is running for president. So what's behind this? Is he acting alone? We may soon find out. Congressman Jim Jordan of Ohio, who sits in the House Judiciary Committee, is calling on Bragg to testify before the Congress. He wants to hear Bragg explain whether or not he's had any contact with the White House or the Biden DOJ. And if he has, maybe that will explain these charges. He also wants to know whether this prosecution will use any federal funds. Let's hope Alvin Bragg, who is committed to the rule of law, complies or is forced to comply very soon. But no matter what happens, if this indictment arrives, no matter who you voted for or plan on voting for, make no mistake, this is a turning point for the country. Now, the headline here is not that they're being unfair to Donald Trump again, though of course they are, or even that Trump is the former president of the United States. Who cares? I mean, though as long as we are indicting retired presidents, where are the charges against George W. Bush for invading Iraq under false pretenses and giving permanent normalized trade relations to China, which completely wrecked our economy? Where are those charges? Don't hold your breath. In Washington, wrecking your own country is not considered a crime. And of course, George W. Bush knows that well, which is why he doesn't seem worried at all. Criticizing the ruling class, that's what they indict you for. But either way, Donald Trump's former job as president of the United States is not really the point here. Yes, of course you can indict former presidents if they've done something wrong. That's not what this is about. The headline here is that there is, as noted, a presidential race in progress right now. And if you check the polls, you will find that Trump is leading the Republican field. That's the unprecedented thing. Taking out your opponent using the justice system. If the Democratic Party is allowed to do this, allowed to crush the presidential frontrunner, the main threat to their power, with a bogus criminal case, where does that leave us? We're done. Because that precedent will live forever. And voters will never again determine the outcome of a presidential election. It's remarkable when you think about it. So after all the yelling from permanent Washington about January 6th and how it was a threat to our democratic norms and the peaceful transfer of power, they've decided to completely short-circuit our democratic norms, not to mention the peaceful transfer of power, using the courts and prosecutors. What happens if they get away with this? No one seems to be thinking this through. Everyone's all spun up, but what happens if they get away with this? If they use the Justice Department, in full view of everyone, to settle a political score and to keep the White House, just to take a guy out of the race who seems to be doing fairly well? We'll destroy the justice system. And that's not a small thing. A functioning justice system has kept this country peaceful for hundreds of years. The purpose of a justice system is to administer justice so that citizens don't have to do it themselves. You outsource that duty to the government. But what happens when you take that away? When there is no justice system? What happens when the Department of Justice decides that its goal is not justice, but protecting the ruling class at all costs? Think about that. People are still going to demand justice. The desire for justice is an inherent human desire. We are born with it. But if there's no neutral place to do it, some people will decide they're going to have to do it themselves. Ooh. Now, we don't know exactly what that's going to look like, but we can say for certain it's going to be really ugly. So they hate Donald Trump. Fine. But they don't get to destroy America's justice system because they do. We would never recover from that. Robert Costello was legal advisor to former Trump attorney Michael Cohen, who made the payment to Stormy Daniels. He joins us tonight. Mr. Costello, thank you so much for coming on. So, as noted, we can't know whether there'll be an indictment or what's in it. But from the leaks that you have read in, say, the New York Times, how do you assess this case?
Weak, to say the least. I just spent 2 hours or so testifying before the grand jury in downtown Manhattan, and I got my point across, although it was clear to me that the Manhattan DA's office did not want to get to the truth. I need to explain that a little bit. I called them up after I saw Michael Cohen on TV stating things that he said he was going to tell the grand jury and had told the grand jury that were contrary to what he told us when we first represented him in April of 2018. So I'm sitting at home watching these lies, and I said, I've got to do something about it. I don't represent Donald Trump, but I do stand for justice, and I think I have a legal obligation to inform both sides. So that's what I did. I had a ton of documents that I had prepared back in 2019 for the Department of Justice. The U.S. Attorney's Office called me up and said, Mr. Costello, we would like to talk to you about your representation of Michael Cohen. I laughed and said, can I presume you have a waiver of the attorney-client privilege? And they said, you presume correctly. I said, fine, send it over. I'll be delighted to talk to you. That waiver is very clear. And once we had that, I prepared 330 emails, a bunch of text messages. I prepared a contemporaneous report of our first meeting with Michael Cohen at the Regency Hotel in Manhattan, as well as a contemporaneous notes of the interview I had for 2 hours with the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Southern District of New York, as well as contemporaneous notes of an interview by the House Committee on Intelligence, who sent 3 investigators to my office, one of whom is now Dan Goldman, a congressman here in New York. So I had all of this material ready. I sent it to Donald Trump's lawyer, and I sent it to the Manhattan DA's office. And I contacted the Manhattan DA's office, and I asked, could we meet with Alvin Bragg? Because I wanted to present this to Alvin Bragg as I had presented it to the Southern District. I wanted him to look me in the eye and assess my credibility. Did I have more credibility than Michael Cohen? Because Michael Cohen, in my opinion, was lying about just about everything. I specifically told them that there were two main points that I wanted to make clear. That Cohen had told us that when we first met him, that he was suicidal. Why is that important? Because when you're suicidal, thinking that that's the only way out of your legal mess, and you're presented with the following options, that you can cooperate against Donald Trump and provide information that would get you a get-out-of-jail-free card, and you respond to us, I do not have any information on Donald Trump. And he said it many times during that 2-hour meeting. I swear to God, Bob, I don't have anything on Donald Trump. And I had my law partner who knew Michael Cohen for 10 years on Columbia Grammar and Prep School here in Manhattan because Cohen was on the board of directors.
Yeah.
And when I heard him say that he was suicidal the weekend before, standing on the roof of the Regency Hotel, I didn't know whether he was a drama queen or telling the truth. So I looked at my partner, and he shook his head and nodded, I think he's telling the truth. And later on, we had that corroborated by the Reverend Jerry Falwell and his wife, who had dinner with Michael Cohen, who told him the same thing. Why is that important? Because when you're willing to give up your life in order to avoid these legal troubles, when they're insurmountable to you, and you're offered a way out, so all you have to do is cooperate on Donald Trump. Do you have anything on Donald Trump? And he says no repeatedly. I swear to God, Bob, I don't have anything. Then you know that you've got a guy who probably doesn't have anything. It's certainly easier to give up information on Donald Trump than it is to kill yourself. On top of that, while he's making these speeches during a 2-hour period, he's marching up and down on the other side of the conference table like a tiger in the zoo, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. He looked like he hadn't slept in 5 days. He looked like somebody who was suicidal. And every once in a while, he would stop and point at us. And when I say once in a while, he did this at least 20 times and said, guys, I want you to know, I will do whatever the F I have to do. I will never spend 1 day in jail. Now, what he's saying is, I'll lie, cheat, steal, shoot somebody. I will not spend a day in jail. Do you think a guy whose mentality is that is going to not admit that he has information on Donald Trump? But having said that, the DA's office didn't ask me questions to bring that up. And I brought it up anyway. I ignored their questions and simply gave them the information. I'm hearing rap in my ear, left and right. I'll continue if you want, but
let me just ask you one final question, if it's okay, Mr. Costello.
Sure.
If you were the DA, if you were a prosecutor and you were trying to be fair and honest and serve the law rather than a political agenda, you'd want to know that, wouldn't you?
Absolutely. And I told them and told the grand jury today, I was deputy chief of the criminal division of the U.S. Attorneys for the Southern District. I said I wouldn't touch a witness like Michael Cohen for any amount of money. You simply cannot rely upon this guy. And tonight, he was on another station denying that he waived the attorney-client privilege. Here it is, in writing, and that's his signature on the second page. So
that's unbelievable.
I guess he didn't know that, and the district attorney didn't know that. And I told them, Michael Cohen has been in your office 20 times and twice in the grand jury, and he forgot to tell you that he waived the attorney-client privilege 22 times? I mean, really, is this the kind of witness you want to ride to the finish line? Not in my book.
I think all they care about is the finish line. But I sure appreciate the information that you brought us tonight.
You're
Robert
quite
Costello,
welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Hermeet Dillon is the founder and managing partner of Dillon Law Group. She joins us tonight. Hermeet, thanks so much for coming on. I think you would agree that the case, at least as it's been described in the leaks to the New York Times and the Washington Post, seems ridiculous. Is there any indication that there's coordination with the Biden White House or DOJ on this?
Well, look, Tucker, thanks for having me. Two of my partners are involved in this case on President Trump's side and have been meeting with the prosecutors here. So most of what we've been able to divine about this case has been by reading the entrails. That is the New York Times, which is the favorite source to leak to of New York law enforcement. And so we don't know exactly what they're aiming for, but as we can see from Robert Costello's statements just now, it appears to be divorced from what the facts are. are and more about what the agenda is. And so this prosecution, if it comes through, is absolutely baseless. It's ludicrous. It has been rejected not only by the FEC, as you mentioned, but also by federal prosecutors and also by prior prosecutors of New York State. So this is really well past its sell-by date, It does not fly in court. It is frivolous. And what you are looking at really, Tucker, is the mother of all election interference here, like you said in your lead into this segment. And so what I can also say is that prosecutors are meant to do not just what they can get away with in court, but they're meant to do justice. And is this justice? So there were apparently at least 10 prosecutors sitting in the room yesterday, or last week rather, when this presentation was made. So that's the amount of manpower that they're putting to hear from lawyers, hear from witnesses, at the same time in New York when the real status is absolutely falling apart there. So I hope for the sake of this country and for the sake of the citizens and voters' confidence in our legal system that this doesn't come to pass, because it will absolutely be catastrophic for public confidence and for the rule of law in this country.
I think that's it. I think that's the point right there. It all falls apart when you use your justice system to prosecute political grudges. Harmeet Dillon, thank you so much for that. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
So the White House briefing room is filled with toadies whose whole job is to bolster whatever lie the Biden administration spoon feeds them. There is at least one man there, though, the best reporter in Africa who asks real questions, Simon Atiba. Today, Simon Atiba was the center of the most chaotic moment in the recent history of the White House press briefings. He joins us after the break. Tell us what happened. If you want to know what a complete sham, what a fraudulent, grotesque perversion of reality the White House briefings have become, you should see what happened today. The low IQ White House press secretary brought in a bunch of TV actors to stand there so she could promote a TV show for some reason. Why are we doing this again? She never really explained. Mental Health Day or something. None of them were doctors. But at the same time, even as she was promoting a TV show, the White House press secretary refused to take questions from actual reporters. First on that list would be our friend Simon Atiba of Today News Africa. So today Atiba just got frustrated and called out the White House press secretary for ignoring his actual questions for months. Watch what happened next.
What you are doing, you are making a monkey of the First Amendment. It's been 7 months. You've not called on me. You've done my messages. I'm saying that's not right. That's not right.
On times, welcome, guys. Welcome. Welcome to the press briefing room.
It isn't about you, Simon. I understand that you get questioned all the time and you don't understand what it is to sit here for 8 months and being discriminated against. I understand that you're in the front row and you feel comfortable and you get questioned all the time. But there are people in the back who don't get any questions.
What has just occurred this last 10, 15 minutes is unacceptable. It is unacceptable. So we're either going to continue the briefing or we can just end the briefing right here.
Outrageous doesn't even describe what we just played for you. So here you have the White House press secretary whose job it is to answer questions from journalists on behalf of the entire American population, hijacking the event to promote a TV show and then screaming at a guy who wants his questions answered. And then the other shills in the room don't take the side of their fellow journalists, but take the side of the lady at the front to whom they are actually beholden and try and shut down Simon Atiba. Who did that? This is a partial list. That would include Jeff Mason of Reuters, who should be ashamed, Brian Karam of CNN, Associated Press correspondent Zeke Miller. He even apologized to the press secretary later in the press conference. They, again, should be ashamed of themselves. And previous generations of reporters would have turned on them. Really, you're taking her side? She's a liar? Your job is not to suck up to power, it's to serve your viewers and readers by getting to the truth. But instead they piled on Simon Atiba. Really the most revealing moment maybe ever in the White House press room. We are honored now to be joined by Simon Atiba himself. Simon, thank you so much for coming on. We're really glad to have you. What prompted, you seem very frustrated there, what prompted your exchange with the press secretary?
Yes, thank you, Tucker. Thank you for having me on your show. I'm grateful.
You know, the First Amendment protects the freedom of speech, the press, and assembly, and the right to petition your government to seek redress. And that First Amendment says that I have the right to ask questions, to do my job, and the press secretary doesn't need to like me, date me, marry me, have 2 black children with me. She doesn't need all that. She doesn't even need to like my accent, doesn't need to like what I look like, where I come from. They look down on me. They don't respect the First Amendment. And so what has been happening in the White House is, in the past 7 months, I've done all the right things. I've not been called on. I've gone to her office to seek a meeting. She said that she will meet with me next year. I've sent questions about the Nigerian election, about, you know, the problems, challenges in Africa. And they've not called on me, even as the vice president is going to Africa, even as the first lady, Jill Biden, went to Africa, even when they received 50 African leaders for the U.S.-African Summit in Washington, D.C., the guy who covers the White House, the African guy who covers the White House, is looked down upon in the greatest country in the world, in the most advanced country where freedom of speech is protected. It's a shame what happened today. One of the guys that you showed there now, Brian, he was kicked out of the WACA because he became violent in the Rose Garden. It's a disgrace. It's very violent. He attacks many people. It's a shame. What happened to me today, it's a total disgrace, and it's happening in the Biden White House. And you know, when it happens to Jim Acosta of CNN, because they respect him, he's white, he works for CNN, I'm black, I'm African, I don't have money, they look down on me, I don't have the opportunities that they have, and they don't treat me the same way. I need to do my job. The freedom of speech and the press in the U.S. allows me to do my job, and that's the only thing that I'm trying to do. And they are stonewalling me, trying to help Karine Jean-Pierre, and it's a shame.
The fact that Jeff Mason and the rest, who should be ashamed of himself, took the White House side against you is really one of the most awful things I've ever seen. I was shocked by it, as cynical as I am, and I appreciate your coming on tonight. You seem unbowed. Simon Atiba, we are rooting for you. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
So they'll lecture you endlessly on TV, all the smart people. We really care about Ukraine. You really care about Ukraine, right? Over 100,000 dead in Ukraine. And for the second time, the White House has shut down an attempted ceasefire. They want this war to continue. We'll cut to tails straight ahead. The Biden administration's reckless interference in the war in Ukraine has pushed China together with Russia, thereby ending for all time American global dominance. And as if to rub it in our faces, the president of China, President Xi, met with Vladimir Putin in Moscow today. He went there in part to broker a ceasefire in the conflict. You can be opposed to Russia and China getting together, but if you care about Ukraine, you probably want this war to end. But this administration wants to keep it going. Here's spokesflack John Kirby explaining.
If they call for a ceasefire, you believe Ukraine should and will reject that?
Yes, we do, and we would reject it as well. We think that that's an unacceptable outcome right now. Obviously, we want the fighting to stop. We want the war to be over, and as I said, it could end today if Mr. Putin would do the right thing. But to call for a ceasefire right now basically ratifies what they've been able to grab inside Ukraine and gives them time and space to prepare for future operations, and that's just not going to be acceptable.
Right. So this is the second time the Biden administration has stopped any attempt to end the war, negotiated end, not immediate frozen in place, but trying to end it. It's the second time, because the point, of course, is regime change in Russia. Now, Trump has taken a lot of flack recently, but on foreign policy, he is a lot clearer thinking than Joe Biden or his little spokesperson you just saw. Here is Trump's assessment of what's going on in Ukraine. We're quoting. The greatest threat to Western civilization today is not Russia. It's probably more than anything else ourselves and some of the horrible USA-hating people who represent us. Glenn Greenwald is host of System Update on Rumble. He joins us tonight to assess this. Glenn, thanks for coming on. For the second time that we know of, the Biden administration has shut down any attempt to reach a brokered ceasefire. Why do you think that is?
From the very beginning, it's been clear that the U.S. wants this war to continue and wants it to go on for as long as possible because they have no interest in protecting Ukraine. They instead want to sacrifice Ukraine, have Ukraine destroyed in order to advance what they think is the United States' political interest, geopolitical interest of weakening Russia. And the way to do that is to use Ukraine as a pawn, kill as many Ukrainians as possible, destroy their whole country if they have to, in order to prolong the war as long as possible. And the response of the U.S. government and its defenders has been, we don't have any position about when the war ends. That's completely up to the Ukrainians. When they want to end the war, they can end the war. If they don't, we'll support them. And the lie just got revealed. If you listen to what John Kirby said, they asked him, are the Ukrainians willing to have a ceasefire? And he said, not only won't they, we won't allow it either. Essentially admitting finally what's long been obvious, that the country funding the war, providing the arms for the war, which is the United States, determines if and when the war ends, and we obviously don't want that war to end.
How are people who are pushing for the sacrifice of more Ukrainian and Russian children, for whatever it's worth, how did they seize the moral high ground in this conversation? They're monsters. How are they allowed to lecture the rest of us about human rights?
So there's a propagandistic narrative from the beginning that the Ukrainians are feisty, courageous, and are fighting for their own country, and we ought to stand by their side. The reality is the complete opposite. The Ukrainians do not want this war to continue. Zelensky is not using a voluntary army. He's using a conscript army. He is drafting these people who are unwilling to fight, and has repeatedly in the last 4 months on 3 occasions increased the punishments for desertion or for people who are otherwise rebelling against this war, because the Ukrainians know that they're being used as cannon fodder for the interest of other people around the world. So it's a conscript army. They're forcing these Ukrainians to go and die in huge numbers for things that are not in their interest. What's in their interest is to negotiate with the Russians over an agreement that will allow Ukraine to keep the parts of their country that want to be ruled by Kiev, and it's the United States and Great Britain that are blocking it purely for our own interests.
Yeah, and then they're lecturing you. Right. Glenn Greenwald, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for that analysis. So you tune into hockey games to watch people play hockey, but on Saturday night, an NHL team out of nowhere started pushing trans activism on Twitter. It makes you wonder what's going on in the National Hockey League. We've got details after the break. Arguing about Stormy Daniels, big things are happening. Biggest of all is life expectancy in the United States going in the wrong direction. One of the drivers of that is health. Americans have a lot more chronic health issues than they used to. Very few people have commented on this or thought about why it's happening. Mark Hyman is a physician and the exception to this. Really an amazing person if you're not familiar with him. He's got a new book out called Young Forever: The Secrets to Living Long, Healthy Lives. We talked to Mark Hyman on many recommendations. You got to talk to Mark Hyman. So we did for a brand new episode of Tucker Carlson today. Here's part of it.
Developed a medical system based on historical phenomena, which is you have a headache, you go to the head doctor. You have a stomach ache, you go to the stomach doctor. It seemed logical, except biology isn't organized that way. It's not the way the body's organized. The body is a system. So rather than treat each individual part, each individual symptom, we treat the root causes and we create health. So functional medicine is the science of creating health as opposed to the science of treating disease. And when you create health, disease goes away as a side effect. We have our whole concept of disease wrong, that it's some entity, a thing that we catch, like a cold.
Yes, that's
or
exactly
COVID,
right.
But it's not like that.
Like someday you just get it.
Yeah, I get heart disease, or I got diabetes, or I get cancer, I get dementia, or I get whatever, autoimmune disease. No, there are really clear causes for these problems that are rooted in things that we now know that we haven't translated into medical practice. And if for every 10% of your calories is ultra-processed food, your risk of death goes up by 14%. And our diet is 60% ultra-processed food, and kids is 67%. It's a national emergency, honestly. I mean, there's 6 million people that die from COVID globally, but 11 million people die every year from bad food.
That's an amazing conversation, even if you love pizza and Oreos, as some of us do. Dr. Mark Hyman, tomorrow, 7 a.m. on Fox Nation. You can stream it. So something is really wrong in the National Hockey League, really wrong. On Saturday, the San Jose Sharks, owned by venture capitalist Hasso-Plattner, hosted effectively a trans appreciation night. Players are told to wear jerseys signifying that they don't believe in biological reality. One of them does, the goalie, and he refused on religious grounds. Apparently in response to that, The San Jose Sharks' official Twitter account began posting true lunacy about gender. And we're not making this up. You should look it up. For example, and we're quoting, "Worldwide, gender diversity is seen far differently than that in the Western world. The Muxe gender is a respected third gender in Zapotec cultures in Oaxaca, Mexico, that has existed for centuries." Ooh, thank you, National Hockey League team. What the hell are they talking about? Well, Greg Price of the State Freedom Caucus Network decided to Google it, and he found out that the Zapotecs, who lived in southern Mexico, were known for a lot more than 3 genders. Like almost every Mesoamerican culture, human sacrifice was at the very center of their world. They put children to death as offerings to their gods. As Price put it, quote, "The San Jose Sharks want us to take cultural advice from an ancient Mexican civilization that participated in child sacrifice." What the hell is going on in the NHL? And why are owners doing this, and how long will fans stick with it? They just want to watch hockey. Scary. We'll be right back. Catturd joins us tonight. Mike Glover, I appreciate your coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So, do you believe that you have been targeted by the Department of Justice?
Absolutely. I mean, American Contingency started with a concept after the Seattle mayor told law enforcement officers to not do their job. So it's a forum of American citizens who are depending and leaning on each other in the absence of people, including politicians, and law enforcement agencies following the politicians and not doing their job.
So you spent most of your life working under arms for the U.S. government on behalf of the country. How does it feel to be targeted by that same government?
It's horrible. I mean, look, I'm an entrepreneur first. I mean,
Yes.
that's what I wanted to do after a long time of service. And it just sucks being targeted by, a country. My mom was targeted. My mom's Facebook account was deleted because the FBI communicated to social media and destroyed all the social media accounts. My mom came here from Korea, from meeting my military dad in the Army, and we're dealing with this. She's dealing with this. Her small beauty salon in Fayetteville, North Carolina is dealing with this.
It's beyond belief, and the fact that the people whose job it is to defend you and the Constitution are ignoring it really grates on me. Is there anything that we don't know? I mean, are you accused of an actual crime that you haven't told us about?
No, so the way it worked is I was labeled a militant, violent extremist organization. Thank God organizations like Project Veritas exist. They leaked this information. An FBI whistleblower came out and said, this is indeed true. And not only that, but the FBI looked into Mike Glover's records. I'm a retired former special operations guy, a sergeant major, have a impeccable career, have done nothing wrong, have never broken any laws, and they went into my career, went into my DD-214, went into my med records, and luckily somebody in the FBI, likely a FBI hostage rescue guy that I work with overseas, did a report and said, hey, this guy's on the up and up. I don't know why you're looking in this guy, but cease and desist. And that's how the traffic was verbalized on a forum within the FBI. So it's something that I thought was a rumor because I was getting suppressed and deleted, canceled off of every social media platform, but it wasn't. It was actually something that was true.
So do you recognize these tactics from the war on terror that you fought in?
Yeah, like if we're talking about subversion, sabotage, if we're looking at government entities going after its citizens, these are the first precursors to operational prepare the environment. We call it shaping the environment. And I don't like seeing it. As somebody who served a very long time, who wants to live in peace, many of my teammates, Tim Kennedy, Chad Robichaud, Jack Carr, we're all entrepreneurs that just want to live a free life and be left alone.
Yes.
And all of these guys have their own little nuances and stories of how they're going after, especially on social media, and it typically roots in foundation back to the U.S. government.
Shocking. It's shocking. Thank you for explaining that.
Yeah.
And I hope you'll tell us what happens.
Thank you.
Thank you. Former President Donald Trump could be indicted any day now. As we told you at the top, reportedly it is imminent. What would that mean for the 2024 election, in which he is the frontrunner on the Republican side, and what would it mean for the future of the United States? Victor Davis Hanson joins us with that. So there are news reports everywhere today that Donald Trump will be indicted as soon as tomorrow, and apparently the NYPD is preparing for protests, etc., setting up barricades. On MSNBC, they're gloating, they're excited, they think Trump's a criminal, they don't care what the crime is. But the rest of us who can more coolly assess America and what our future might be if this were to happen wonder about the implications of it. But we're not smart enough to foresee all of them, and that's why we're happy to be joined tonight by a much smarter man, Victor Davis Hanson, a senior fellow at the Hoover Institution, who joins us now. Professor, thank you for coming on. If the presidential frontrunner on the Republican side is indicted for a non-crime tomorrow or soon, what will it mean for this country?
Well, there's two things that a republic needs to survive, and one is you have to have a judicial system that's not weaponized, and you can't criminalize politics. We're doing both. And what's ironic is what we're going to see tomorrow is something that was de rigueur. Unfortunately, it's been happening all the time. I can remember when Bill Clinton was facing Monica Lewinsky's testimony, and Vernon Jordan tried to pressure her to take a job for $80,000 something for Revlon, so she either wouldn't testify against him, or if she did, she would give favorable testimony. And Donald Trump was impeached, Tucker, the first time on the allegation that he used foreign policy as a mechanism to go after or to help him in the upcoming election. But Barack Obama in Seoul, South Korea just said in a hot mic that he told the Russian president that he was willing to dismantle missile defense, which have been very handy right now in the Ukraine war, if Vladimir Putin would give him space while he was up for re-election. And that was about as quid pro quo as you could get. And so we look at all, and we have a president right now who's probably could face Donald Trump, and we have very asymmetrical treatment about the way the Mar-a-Lago raid was conducted versus the Biden raid. And it just continues that the American people are watching this and they're saying, these people don't even try to hide it. They're so asymmetrical, they're not applying the law equally. What are they afraid of? And I think they're afraid of that the people, the majority of the people, are not going to vote for them. And they have the institutional support. They own Hollywood entertainment, the corporate boardroom, academia, K through 12. But even with all that power, institutional power, they're still paranoid of what the people feel and what the people would do. So they have this weaponized criminal justice system and this criminalizing of politics. And I don't know how long it can continue and you can still have a republic, because the cynicism is at pandemic proportions.
Yes. The cynicism, I think that's so nicely put. You hear people who kind of believed in the system sort of dismissing it as fake, and that's not a good thing at all. Victor Davis Hanson, I appreciate your perspective on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So a lot of the news is pretty upsetting right now, and we're sorry to give you an OD of it, but we want to step back just for a moment mid-show and recognize that there is a lot of good going on in the world, despite the tragedies that happen in the end to everybody. And Scott Hamilton is a perfect example of someone who triumphed over the bad to find the joy. He, of course, is an Olympic gold figure skater. He won the gold in 1984 at the Olympics. And he told us about how the sad things in his life, losing his mother to cancer, getting sick himself, in fact turned out to be some of the greatest, most clarifying things in his life. We spoke to him for a brand new episode of Tucker Carlson today. Here's part of it.
I turned 18, I was sponsored, and I had my very own first apartment. Okay, do the math. How did that go?
Probably not that.
No, it was awful. It was bad. I don't even know how I made it to nationals that year. I was distracted. I wasn't trained properly.
Of course.
I didn't have the structure I had the year before. And that would be the last time my mom would ever see me skate in competition.
Oh gosh.
So she lost her battle, and she was the person in my life I loved the most. And how am I going to do this without her? I had to figure out what to do, so I just went on a walk in my backyard. And in that walk, I realized that I didn't have to do anything without her. I could take her with me. And so I would take her with me to the ice every day. And I was going to say, it's about time I grow up and I'd be the person that she dreamed that I would be. And she'd always say, when I'd finally pass a figure test, we're going to the Olympics someday. And I was like, based on what? It was kind of like, I'm last place guy. I'm not first place guy.
There wasn't a lot of evidence.
No, there was no evidence to support at all, right? So I took her to the ice with me every practice, and every day I was going to honor her. Every day, honor her. And so that next season, I was ranked 3rd in the United States and 11th in the world. And then 2 years later, I'm on the Olympic team in Lake Placid. 3rd guy on a 3-man team.
Wow.
It's basically a tourist. I have no chance of medaling or anything, so I'm just there to have a good time. I get elected to carry the flag in the opening ceremony to lead the team out, and I couldn't figure out why. And our team leader, Michael Botticelli, love Michael, he sold it not on who's going to win the Olympics. It wasn't about the destination. He presented me as a candidate based on the journey. And they just thought that my journey was unique and that would represent that team pretty well. And so the hockey team wins the gold medal, and Eric Heiden wins every race in the Olympics, and I come in 5th, which was 3 places better than I ever dreamed I could be.
Scott Hamilton, our conversation with him, the full hour streams tomorrow, 7 a.m. on Fox Nation. So here's kind of a repulsive yet scary story. A highly contagious fungus of some kind is spreading up across the United States. Very high death rate from the fungus. What is it? Where is it? And what should you know about it? Dr. Mark Siegel next.